Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flicks presentation of Season 2 of Newsroom, Episode 5, News Night with News Night with Will McAvoy.
Teleprompter up in here.
That's where they just ran out of titles for the show, apparently.
Well, it's just in case you didn't know the name of the program or the star.
Right.
Like, so why is this a good title?
The entire episode takes place within the news hour. Like this is, it's not exactly real time. There's no gimmicky clock in the
60
corner or
Minutes
anything.
would have been a better title.
Well, that's another show.
Clever though.
It's a different
Little
show.
clever.
That would have been baffling. So yeah, so everything that happens in the show happens either on set or backstage during the shooting of the episode of a typical episode of News Night with Will McAvoy. I gotta say, this is probably my favorite episode of this show so far. Not without its problems, but I think that having to go lean and mean and keeping things compressed, maybe, dissuades them from some of the more bullshitty things this show does.
I wish I could find a better way to describe what it is that is so, when Aaron Sorkin works, what's great and what happens when he doesn't work. Like what is missing? Like what about the similar conversations, right? Where's the gap? That this is the West Wing and you're like, okay, it's the same kind of conversation but I'm into it. And then for this, I want to punch everybody.
Yeah. Are you too close? I mean, is that,
I don't think it's the closeness. I don't think that has anything to do with it. I was certainly close on Sports Night. And I didn't have the same level of irritation.
I think what's missing is Jerry Seinfeld. And okay, let me explain. Okay.
Who was
Go on.
He was the Secretary of the Interior in West Wing.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Larry, it was the #1 show.
I'm the Secretary of the Interior. I'm in charge of everything in the interior of the country.
Can we get a resume in here for me? The movie opens tomorrow.
Exterior, somebody else.
Interior, that's me.
So here's what I mean by that. Larry David by himself, when he does Curb Your Enthusiasm, in a lot of ways it reminds me of Sorkin by himself doing Newsroom. Like it's undisciplined, it's self-indulgent, it's at times brilliant, but oftentimes way over the top, and you wish there was a Seinfeld in the room to say, Larry, that was great, now let's bring it down, let's funnel it, let's hone it.
So he's John Wells, is what you're saying.
He's Larry David.
Right, and you think John Wells is the Seinfeld
yes,
Aaron Sorkin.
exactly.
He's they need the professional to come in the room and refine it. Although having the Newsroom is not the dramatic equivalent of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I do not think that's in any way fair to Curb Your Enthusiasm. I see your point.
In terms of a creator's unfettered vision,
Yes,
I totally get what you're saying.
And you don't think Curb Your Enthusiasm sometimes goes so over the top? You're like, come on, Larry, bring it
But
back.
it's what you watch
But
for.
it's a comedy at least, so you're not
right.
sort of we're not sitting around saying that this is how life really is.
Right, but it almost becomes unfunny because it's so over the top that
Sometimes,
you're like,
maybe.
it would be more
Too
funny if
labored.
you were 2.5 degrees less over the top.
I feel like in general, the people who have a problem with the show, like what you just said right there, could be applied to many episodes. But I feel like this is not an episode that could really be applied to.
No, he was just bringing it up. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
I agree with Alonso. This was my favorite episode.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if this was my favorite. There were a few in season 1 that I felt more like emotionally affected by, but I like that side of Newsroom in a way that you guys don't. The more obvious, like preaching to the choir side of Newsroom. I really like this format. I think they should do this at least once a season, maybe. And it was a visually very different episode than normal. Everything was muted and toned down. It was quiet. I felt like there was less use of music. The colors were more muted. And I felt as I was watching it, if this was any other show, I would be bored right now, but I wasn't. I loved the conversations. Every one of the storylines was interesting in its own way.
There weren't a lot of big moments,
No, there weren't really
or
at all.
big speeches. It was much more about the day-to-day, this needs to get done, let's address this issue. And
Exactly.
And within that, there was still character stuff. There was still interesting plot stuff going on.
People being kicked in the balls.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good stuff in there that I want to discuss. First of all, my favorite moment in Newsroom history happened in this episode when they talked about Huffington Post.
I was hoping they
It was
talked about
almost like they were in one of our production meetings.
Totally, yeah.
And I'm
had
like,
that
is
conversation.
Sorkin not only basing this on the Young Turks, but how did he get a camera inside our production meeting? Right? So that was a great, great moment of like a little bit of truth there.
With the
nip
Huffington
slips
Post's
and side
inability to stay away from side boobs and
side boobs,
who looked worse
nip
this
slips,
weekend.
yeah.
Right.
And so, but I mean, like the side boob and the nip slip, even like to me, sometimes the most egregious thing is just essentially lists of who was ugly this weekend. Like just who looked like shit this weekend and who looked great. Like
Yeah.
it's not even inventive. It's not
and
even like a little
Sorkin-
titillating. It's just mean.
So, and Sorkin's coming at it from the same exact place we do. We like Huffington Post. We want it to succeed.
Right.
And there's a lot of good content on there, and it's done a good thing for the country overall, if I can even be that bold. And we're just like,
don't count me into this because
Okay, all right.
Huffington Post doesn't pay their writers, and they can go fuck off as far as I'm concerned. But
All right,
that's
so-
just me.
And also, he's been criticized quite a bit on the Huffington Post, so he kind of has an axe to grind with them in a way that, well, I guess me and you do too, since we've been criticized. by
No,
Huffington
no.
Post.
I have no axe to grind. I'm one of their top writers, meaning like most prolific in their history of Huffington Post, most popular, not a big deal. Okay, all right, okay, and I've never gotten paid a cent, and I don't think I should. So we have a disagreement on that, et cetera. But like, I feel like Sorkin's like, it's the right place. Just give me a little less nip slip, right? So anyway, that was a great moment. It was very true. And then the Sloan storyline was really interesting, and I was a little torn on it. I was wondering, like, here's the one great character they have, and I wonder if they should, have the naked pictures of her, like, and thereby bring in the women issue again. Like, now all of the female characters have had dramatic issues. This one, her being naked, right? I love the ending. I mean, punching him, taking the picture. I actually think that was a good
I thought that
Sorkin
was
moment.
the weakest part of that
I thought it was the
storyline.
weakest part too, although it was just because it felt overly dramatic to me. I didn't have a problem with her being in this because she was just completely a victim, and as we know, taking naked pictures of a guy you're involved with, God bless you, go forward.
I think the only thing that bugged me about that subplot was that it was very tidy that this episode has the Rutgers privacy case and Sandra Fluke, and so we have a slut-shaming privacy issue for Sloan, and then this episode also has Trayvon Martin, which of course touches all of Maggie's buttons about dead black child after her Africa sojourn. So that all felt a little too neat and writerly, but I'll forgive that.
Why I did not like the end of that storyline is she has her dramatic, like she finishes with Don and his phone call and everything, and she walks out and she's realized something, you can tell. And so you see the meeting and something's gonna happen, and she walks in, and I thought she was going to publicly humiliate him. Just kicking him and punching him, like, what kind of revelation did you have? Oh, this is a time for violence. That doesn't seem.
No,
I expected
totally
more.
disagree. The public humiliation among his friends is nothing. I mean, that's what happens in
She's
every
just gonna
cliched
she's
movie.
gonna be arrested now. Like,
No, that's what happens in every cliched movie. And what'll happen in real life is that after she leaves the room, they'll snicker. They'll be like, "Ah, you got her." They were like, "There's no shaming there, whatever."
I
right?
feel like kicking the balls is what happens in every movie.
No, punching him in the mouth, taking a picture, and putting that on the internet, I think is awesome.
She got him good, by the way. He
Yeah.
was covered in blood.
Yeah.
right in
But
the
what I think is most interesting about that storyline is she obviously has had this happen in her personal life. Her phone was hacked into, and these personal photos have
Oh,
been
I didn't
leaked.
know that.
Yeah, a
that's
couple
right,
of
I
times
forgot.
actually.
I forgot,
And
yeah.
also, you have to bear in mind at the same time that Allison Pill accidentally tweeted the topless photo of her, which could very well have been sort of a promotional thing, since people were saying no character would actually do the stupid things they're doing on the show. And then she tweets the topless photo by accident. So obviously, it's interesting to have her act.
Looking at it.
It was pretty good. It was you're terrible.
dick.
But it was interesting to see her act this out when she has gone through that, in her own life, and not just photos. These were photos that she had written messages to the guy she was dating on, like very personal, very intrusive.
I just felt with Will's father dying and with that this was very mechanical in its writing and presentation and what we were being led to. Like, I knew that each break he didn't call, that I felt like he's going to say in the middle, he's going to say in the middle of a conversation to Mac, my father died, and it was identical, and it just felt like if I'd been writing it, and I'm not a writer, but if I'd been writing it, I would have thought, I've telegraphed this too much. I need to figure out a different way to get what I want to happen here. And then with her going to see him, talking about rage, I'm like, yeah, she's gonna go. She's gonna mess this. I don't know, kicking the balls, but it's gonna be too much. And then I didn't like Don's macho no there. I would have it would have been cooler. Again, this is really
getting his ass
nitpicking.
kicked,
I would have Don there in case he was really needed. Sure. I got, but like that, if he just been like, I don't know, just something about stepping up there I didn't like that. But I hate Don.
He's kind of irritating. I didn't buy that Will, even having just heard that his father had died, would freeze on camera.
Not either.
Because I feel like he's such a creature of that world and knows the stuff so well that he would get it together, or he would have realized that was going to happen, and he would have told them to run another commercial or cut the tape or something.
Right, I agree. A 5-second delay, a 2-second delay of Will, even enough for her to go Will, or he was better again, but subtler is him. The hesitation, she starts to lean in, and the moment she starts to lean in, he starts to talk.
Right.
But that felt. Again, that felt
15, 20
seconds.
Right. I agree. He needs, but
maybe George.
It just starts to feel artificial. And again, and the inability of somehow on the West Wing, and I did note it on the West Wing, and it bothered me when characters never get anything wrong, and when they do, it's because they're too clever.
They care too much.
Right, exactly. But I mean, even here, even these conversations, like every conversation people have is occasionally stilted. People don't always know the right thing. Like Maggie's ability to defend herself against the gigantic journalistic mistake of leaving out the 911 operator's question about was he white or black. Like her ability to defend herself, that conversation, for Sorkin to make that conversation happen in 21 seconds, which would take the rest of the living known world, the smart known living world, a minute and 21 seconds, I think takes us out of the moment too much.
What did you think of Charlie's conversation with Trenchcoat Man?
That was great.
I liked that.
I
thought that was very good. And then when he handed it, what did he say the rolled up paper was?
That it had to do with the computers in Provo.
Okay, here's the information about Provo.
Yeah.
So
at this point, how can you blame them for running the story?
So far,
they've gotten all the evidence they could possibly need.
The guy's been there for, what'd they say, 7 months? He's been in Washington asking these questions. The guy from Dantana's restaurant here, Jerry Dantana, and then all of a sudden, they're doing everything right, and they literally have a high-ranking officer
admitting to it.
But that made me think, are they setting them up? Are they setting them up to run the wrong story? Because otherwise, I'd have run this story 6 months ago if it was me.
Also,
to be honest,
you can't just call quartermaster Again, Charlie doesn't know. How does Charlie get in touch with 3 quartermasters? He's like, I talked to 3. I talked to 3 quartermasters in the last 11 seconds, and they all said, I don't know what MD-76 is. Wouldn't you call your guy back? You gotta. They need to find out what MD-76 is before they have a story.
So the one part that I really didn't like in this episode was when the trenchcoat guy from the NSA or wherever he is says, you would have riots in the Middle East, we'd have riots in this country. And I thought, look, I know in a lot of ways Newsroom is what we want the news to be. So the fact that they caught the mistake about the 9/11 call within the show and they corrected it within the show is what we wish NBC had done in the middle of their show, that someone in the newsroom would have noticed, hey, wait a minute, didn't we just run it without the without the question, right?
Right.
So that I accept and I like, right? But does Sorkin really believe that there would have been riots inside this country if we found out we were using sarin gas? I don't think there would be.
Extricate hostages?
Yeah, I hardly think there'd be a
I don't
peak.
think he meant riots here.
Kim Kardashian's wedding, maybe. I think.
Yeah,
I think he meant riots abroad.
No, he said
also.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know if he's being overly dramatic or he just doesn't know. People, Rush Limbaugh would be out in a second saying oh, they had it coming. It was a frat boy kind of thing to do, to use chemical weapons, et cetera. And 50% of the country would agree with them. And then we'd get into debates and then they'd run propaganda on CNN about how sarin gas is actually not that bad. Right. It has some positive side effects, et cetera.
71% of kids exposed to sarin gas go to college.
Right.
It's a higher percentage than the non-sarin gas exposed kids.
Yeah, and by the way, we have used Willie Pete. We use white phosphorus we used it in Iraq, and the birth defects in the 2 cities that we used it in the south and in the central Iraq are hideous. Literally,
white phosphorus? You mean depleted uranium?
Well, it's unclear if it's the depleted uranium or the white phosphorus that's causing it. They need more studies on that. But whichever one, the birth defects are 20 times the amount there are in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay? Now, where's the riots in the streets in America? Nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that just grated on me a little bit.
I do like how in that conversation, the pretext for him coming was to talk about that controversial data center that they're building for the Navy.
Like they just got lucky.
What do you mean?
Timing-wise.
Oh, yeah. But I
they-
love that they're setting up that next season's going to be about wiretapping,
Yeah.
and they're going to go back to that.
Right,
I
but
think
it's nice
that's
they did
great.
catch a break there. That they have a giant data collection talking point there in the middle of the episode.
Yeah.
So did we, now to go back to his dad, when he paused for that while and then he said, I guess it's just you and me now, was he referring to him and the audience, like that the audience is the only thing left to judge him from now on, the only thing he has to get approval from?
I was thinking about that, but then also the fact that he has a sister that I didn't know before this, because she's the one who answered the phone. I was
We
thinking
talked about defending his siblings before.
True, yeah. I was thinking that with them to some extent also that they now have to face
I think
life without
Jen's
their
right. I didn't
father.
think about that, but I
no,
think that's
I mean, I
right.
think there's
I think you're
multiple
probably right.
interpretations, and absolutely that's one of them. Yeah,
Or
no
in
question.
some crazy level, possibly Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you guys have kind of confirmed that that's probably it, then that's a great line.
It's a great line. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily make sense to the audience, but I'm willing to forgive that. If he had gone 7 seconds instead of 27 seconds
right.
before he gave that line, it would have been nearly perfect and a West Wing type of moment.
Real quick, I did like Mac shutting down the Rutgers kid. I like the idea that this dude was basically sort of concern trolling and kind of exploiting this tragedy to sort of make his own kind of media moment, and that she just sort of
Yeah, I like that too, and then I like that she didn't really go back. That her last contact with him is, good luck with that, whatever his name is.
that was
Instead of like she didn't say, like I thought, oh, they'll make this happy, and I was right about a couple of things in this episode. I'm also wrong about like 38 things that I think are going to happen. But she did not go back into the room and say, if we ever do a segment on coming out to your parents, we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah.
You give them a big hug,
glad they didn't do that.
Totally glad, but I thought we were headed for that, and we didn't, and that was good.
And
yeah.
she's right. They're not that kind of show. They're not Maury Povich. That would have been.
To ACN's,
She treated him like a grown-up.
Yes,
She treated him like a
absolutely.
grown-up, yeah.
to ACN's,
Even though he was gay.
But his hair was at least bi-curious.
His hair was totally bicurious. Yeah.
never heard that before in that context regarding hair.
Oh, I have.
Oh, that's fun. No, to ACN's credit, they're better than the Young Turks in that regard. I would have had the guy on. I think it would have been interesting. Yeah.
I think all over YouTube. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Oh my God, how many views? Just for that.
Oh, that's a good point.
And I just think it's interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah, the flip side, as to what you were saying, the World Net Daily refusing to take down the piece just because of the traffic and everything was
That was
interesting.
such a great. That was great, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Don. That was my favorite moment of Don. I mean, his
conference call.
his breakdown on the conference call,
He
because
always
it was
breaks down though.
no, I mean his screaming on the conference call, like that sort of intense rage that I feel when I'm talking to Verizon. and so it's just like but I already told you what I'm talking about. I can't keep telling the same person again. And he's like, yeah, the 17 times are on there because of you. It's you. I made it up. It has to. But and you can't tell whether the guy, like so many problems with people on the right now, like you don't really know whether the guy from World Net Daily is dumb or corrupt. Like you don't. He might
Corrupt.
think, no, it's got seven. We got a lot of sources from it. Yeah, right.
There's this weird
That's what
subjective
Fox does.
reality. Like, I mean, did you guys see the thing that was going around this weekend online, the 35 best instances of people thinking that an Onion story was true? And it was all these sort of like, they were posted on Facebook and people were like, I can't believe this. And then on some of them, they would have commenters saying, it's a joke. It's a joke. He goes, well, what do you mean? Like, and they would get all huffy as though the person were implying that, oh, you were quoting Fox News or not a real news source. It's like, no, it's really not true.
It's really
and they're
actually a
like, well,
joke.
that's your opinion. I mean, so people will now just grab onto anything, and if they see it in print somewhere, they can decide that it's their fact. And if you
invest themselves in
exactly,
it.
and so if you argue that fact with them, then it's just because you have a bias.
It's a great way of saying it. I mean, that's right. That people invest themselves in it, and it's really hard to talk people out of something they're invested themselves in. Myself included.
And if the audience doesn't know, I mean, that's based on a real story that happened to Chuck Hagel. somebody joked around that he had been speaking at the Friends of Hezbollah.
Yes,
There's
I
no
remember.
group such as the Friends of Hezbollah.
Could they have written that? Was that in time? Does that work? That could have been there.
Well, he certainly must have seen that as he was writing it. It probably wasn't within the time frame of Newsroom at that moment in time. So that's why he made it not about Hagel, but about some other secretary
Yeah.
being nominated for something and changed the name from Friends of Hezbollah to.
Yeah,
Or its Daughters of Jihad or whatever.
That Don scene did have one of my favorite split-second moments. I know that you're not a huge fan of Don, and we are probably a little bit worried about the relationship that's developing between them because it's probably going to be boring and annoying. But I loved when she says, do I look like I'm in the mood to laugh? And he calls up and he's like, "Hey, Munch," and she laughs, and they cut so perfectly away from that. I thought that was a very adorable moment.
She is an adorable, credible, believable character.
Well, and this is her Oscar submission episode, no question.
Right, the only one, and she was really good. And look, this was his best. This was Don's best episode for me. And if they have a relationship, I'm great. Just don't draw it out. Don't have it be a three-way. Don't have him be afraid to ask her out while she dates 6 other guys from fucking Wall Street while this goes on.
Yeah.
And
They do have all of the Maggie stuff, the allusions to the fact that apparently now she's going out and getting drunk and sleeping with different people constantly. She's decided to stay living with her roommate, which no one would do. No one would do.
Yeah,
if you guys want to explain this in the comments, how is it that she cut her hair when she got back from Africa, which you think is going to be the setup for the short red hair that we see in the deposition, but on this episode, it's back to long and it's still blonde. Are there 2 haircuts? What's happening?
I don't think she cut her hair as soon as she got back. I think it was an awkward flash forward of some sort.
So she cut.
I think that she has not yet cut her hair.
Has to be.
All right, well,
It has to be.
then that's very awkwardly edited in that previous episode.
I agree.
I agree with that. But on the other hand, I thought this was the best Maggie episode. Now that is damning with the faintest praise in American history. But the subtlety of the drinking and the problems that it caused, I thought actually was well played. And it's the only subtle thing that's ever happened in regard to Maggie.
But can't we just what's our evidence that she's not incompetent?
In terms of her work,
Yeah.
or mentally?
All the way around. But I mean, I'll grant that this terrible thing happened to her.
It's been 5 months and she's still
Other
working.
moments on the show where she comes through.
Sort of. She doesn't. I mean, again, though. But I mean, she Africa. No one talks about Africa in general. You talk about specific countries. She needs this. She's constantly looking for this sort of validating story. She knew nothing of strife in Africa until she decided she needed an issue. I don't buy her existence and their relation to her as someone who is worthy of serious inclusion. Like she would be, get Maggie to do it, I guess, because there's no one else, and she'll get it done.
experience.
She'll finish on time.
Well, I don't remember all her scenes, and I know that from time to time her dialogue is brilliant just because Aaron Sorkin wrote it,
right, yeah.
and it's out of character, and her character is I think I agree with you, general incompetence. But it seems like there's 20 people in the newsroom, to your point, that you would go to before Maggie.
I think they do, in general.
You think so? I mean, why is she editing
No,
the
he
most
went to-
important tape?
He went to her first. Are you doing something right now? And they had that fucking painful conversation where they
Well, she was already doing it though when he went to ask her.
right, but she was right, but he went to her, but I mean, she was his first choice for that.
Wasn't
but-
she the intern or whatever? So why
She's
isn't
the
there?
assistant.
Yeah, there's like 20 more senior producers in the newsroom. Why is she downloading the Trayvon Martin tape and editing it?
At 5K a second. The final point that I want to make for this episode, I think that Aaron Sorkin made an interesting move that is questionable in terms of his thoughts about women. So they're having the conversation, Maggie and Jim are having the conversation about the girl Haley writing the articles about Sandra Fluke and how you think that's really feminism, but that's not really feminism. And she goes on a rant about how I'm pro-sex and I think it's fine to go out and have sex with as many people as you want, which until they talked about the alcohol seemed like, she doesn't really seem like that at all. But then she talks about it and she's presenting herself as liberated and sexually free. But then it becomes clear by the end of the episode that she's just escaping to these men to get away from her psychological demons.
So she's not liberated, she's damaged.
Yeah, exactly. She says she doesn't want to sleep alone or be alone at night.
Right.
What does that really say about her and also possibly Sorkin's views of women? So I think that's interesting. I'm sure this is the beginning of a storyline with Maggie and getting over that. But
We could
yeah.
always hope not.
Fingers crossed.
Mass media is terrified of an actual sexually liberated woman, so we're not going to be getting one
I
from
do
this
think
program.
that it was what was really well done, and I agree. I mean, I basically liked this episode. There's more Jane Fonda, please, though. And Chris Messina is a very rangy actor, by the way. I find. I mean, he can be loathsome. He's appealing in Damages, which I'm sort of watching concurrently. So it feels right. The mini, so things it just feels like he's in everything, and and having him be horrible here is, it's a stretch, and I like him quite a bit. But I think it was good for people to see, because so much of the criticism of journalism, both from the right and the left, here's where I'll draw them somewhat in parallel terms, has it slightly, in many people's heads, more conspiratorial than it is incompetent and rushed. And I have very little doubt that that Trayvon tape was cut by NBC. And I don't know how NBC explained it, but that was cut by time and pressure and someone probably not trained and not thinking critically about what that meant. When I worked in, of the 200 people who've come in and out of my life in newsrooms, 160 of them could have gotten that wrong and would have had someone explain to them why it was a big deal.
Yeah.
So, and not because they were like, I'm going to make George Zimmerman seem like a racist. Right, exactly.
I'm going to get justice for black people in a subconscious way.
Right.
No, it's just you got to squeeze it in 25 seconds, and you make the wrong call in a hurry.
And you make a wrong call in a hurry, and even more so, and you think, it's bigger. It lands a bigger impact if he says he looks black, and you don't even step back and think, no, you're not. Yeah.
All right, and in this newsroom, they're waving at us frantically, so we should probably wrap.
So we got to go. So thanks for watching. Next week, episode 6. I'm sorry. You should. You know what? You're more anxious about it. You tell people that episode 6 next week, and we're super excited about it.
I am super excited. I wish that there was more than 4 forthcoming.
So 4 more. You're right.
Thank God.
Thanks.
No.